In the silent corridors of Harmony Station, a human father opened his door to a lonely alien widow. But her people had one rule: no home is shared unless a bond is claimed. The legend begins now. Eric Donovan had never realized how loud silence could be until it became the defining soundtrack of his life. 6 months had passed since Sarah's death, yet every morning he woke to the same cold, hollow space beside him, a void shaped exactly like the woman he had loved. He sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, rubbing his face the way exhausted men did when they had run out of excuses to keep going, but somehow kept going anyway. The artificial daylight cycle of Harmony Station cast a soft glow across the bedroom, illuminating the lonely imprint on the mattress. It was strange, he thought. Time marched on, calendars flipped, and the station rotated its mechanical rhythm without pause. And yet grief stayed stuck, heavy, unmoving, drenched in memory. The apartment felt smaller since Sarah's absence. A two-room living space meant for modest families had transformed into something like a storage unit of half-finished responsibilities. Engineering manuals strewn across the table, laundry piles that reproduced on their own toys scattered like landmines across the floor. Somewhere amid the mess, his daughter Lily searched for her school tablet with the frantic determination only a 7-year-old could muster. "Daddy, I can't find it," her voice carried from the living room, bright but edged with frustration. "Check under the couch," Eric called back, forcing cheerfulness into his tone. He ran a hand through his short blonde hair and sighed at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles carved under green eyes, jaw, unshaven shoulders slumped with the invisible weight of trying to be both parents at once. At 35, he was still physically strong, lean from years of maintenance work on the station's high-gravity decks, but emotionally he felt decades older. The chirp of an incoming message interrupted the moment. He tapped the small device strapped to his wrist. "Donovan here." Engineer Donovan came the supervisor's gravelly voice. "We need you at Junction 42. Atmospheric regulators are cycling unevenly again." Of course they were. Everything that could break on this station eventually broke, just rarely at convenient times. "I'll be there in 20, Eric answered. He found Lily sitting cross-legged on the floor, golden curls spilling over her face as she rummaged through a mountain of clothes, art supplies, and toy hover cars. Her smile beamed when she finally pulled out her tablet, triumphant as if she'd discovered buried treasure. "Found it. Great job." "Now breakfast," he said, stepping over a small stack of engineering parts he'd meant to clean up a week ago. The kitchen synthesizer blinked an angry red symbol when he tried to program oatmeal. "Come on," he muttered. The machine crackled. "Damn, darn it." "You said a bad word," Lily teased. "I know, sweetheart. Sorry." Eventually, the device coughed out something warm and vaguely oatmeal-like. He slid the bowl in front of her and crouched down so they were eye to eye. "Listen, kiddo, I have to go in early today. Mrs. Wolf next door will take you to school." Lily's smile faded instantly. "But you promised we'd have breakfast together." Guilt pressed into his ribcage, sharp, familiar, merciless. "I know, Lily, and I'm sorry, but the station needs fixing. And you're the only one who can do it." She finished, her voice small and resigned. "That's what you always say." He knelt beside her chair, brushing a curl behind her ear. "I promise I'll make it up to you. This weekend observation deck stars the whole thing." Her expression softened. "Promise, cross my heart." He kissed her forehead. "Now eat up. I'll call Mrs. Wolf." After dropping Lily off, Eric trudged down the curved corridors of Harmony Station. The great orbital habitat housed more than 10,000 beings: humans, aliens, diplomats, families, refugees. Politicians called the place the shining beacon of interstellar unity. To Eric, it was where pipes burst at 3 a.m. and oxygen scrubbers malfunctioned when someone sneezed too hard. His shift dragged. Every hour felt heavier. When he finally returned home, exhaustion seeped through his bones. The apartment was exactly as chaotic as he'd left it, dishes stacked like a leaning tower, toys everywhere, and a message from Lily's teacher about incomplete homework. He collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. Something had to change. He couldn't work full-time, be a father, be a homemaker, be everything. Something always slipped, and it was almost always Lily who paid the price. The childcare services on Harmony were expensive, crowded, and depressingly clinical. Bright white walls, tired attendants, children filed like cargo. With a groan, he grabbed his tablet and opened the community job board. His fingers hesitated over the keys. Single human father seeks household assistance. Duties include childcare for a 7-year-old girl, meal preparation, and general housekeeping. Competitive compensation offered. All species welcome. References required. He stared at the words as if they were a confession of failure. Was he betraying Sarah by admitting he couldn't handle everything alone? "What would you do, Sarah?" he whispered to the still air. Only silence answered until small feet padded into the room. "Daddy, I'm hungry." His stomach dropped when he checked the time. Oh no, I forgot dinner again. He scrambled in the kitchen, digging out a protein bar and a bruised piece of fruit. Lily accepted them without complaint, though the disappointment in her eyes was a knife he couldn't pull out. That was the moment he made the decision. He tapped send. Lily peered over curiously. "What's that?" "I'm getting us some help. Someone who can make sure you get proper meals and help with homework when I'm working late." Lily considered it, like a new mommy. The question hit him square in the chest. "No, honey, just someone to help out." Oh, the way her shoulders slumped shattered him. "I miss having a mommy." "I know, sweetheart." His voice cracked despite his efforts. "I miss her too." That night, after tucking Lily into bed, Eric checked the tablet again. Notifications blinked in the corner. Someone had responded. A single message. "Hello, my name is Shay. I am seeking work and housing. I would like to request an interview." Just one message, but something about it tugged at him. Late into the night and sleep drifting just out of reach, Eric stared at the ceiling again, wondering what kind of stranger might soon step into their lives. He wondered whether this was the start of things improving or the first step into another kind of chaos. Either way, tomorrow at 10 he would find out. The next morning, the apartment looked as though it had survived a small gravitational storm. Clothes stuffed into corners, engineering parts gleaming under chairs. A trail of glitter still unexplained from one end of the living space to the other. And in the middle of that chaos stood Eric Donovan, now somehow sweating despite the station's stable climate control, clutching a cleaning rag like it was a weapon of last resort. Shay would be there at 10. It was 9:18. "Lily," he called out, shoving a mountain of laundry into a closet that absolutely would avalanche later. "Please put your toys away." "But I'm working on something," she yelled back. "Whatever it is, it needs to be cleaned up today, please." There was a huff, the universal sound of a child who believed the world was grossly unfair. Eric pushed a stack of tools behind a cabinet door, glanced around and decided the apartment looked acceptable. Not great, definitely not good, but acceptable in the way crashing starships sometimes landed without exploding. He checked the time again, 9:45. His stomach twisted. "Okay," he muttered to himself. "This is fine. You're just interviewing someone. It's not a big deal." But of course it was. They weren't just interviewing a worker. They were inviting someone into the fragile little family he was trying desperately to keep from falling apart. The door chime rang exactly at 10 hard. Eric froze for half a second, then straightened his shirt, pushed a stray sock under the couch with his foot, and opened the door. The greeting he had rehearsed disintegrated instantly. Standing in the corridor was a woman, humanoid, slender and radiant in a way he couldn't quite identify. Her skin was a soft, luminous blue, shimmering faintly under the station's lights, like sunlight sparkling on ocean water. Her features were sharp but elegant, her high cheekbones framing eyes that glowed a gentle sea green. Instead of hair, delicate tendrils flowed from her scalp, gathered into a neat tail behind her head. And half hidden behind her legs, clinging shyly to the fabric of her tunic, was a small, blue-skinned girl with wide, curious eyes. "Mr. Donovan?" the woman asked. Her voice had a musical quality, a graceful lilt. "I am Shay. I hope I am not late." "No," Eric managed after a moment of stunned silence. "You're right on time. Please, come in." They stepped inside, quiet and graceful, carrying only a single small bag between them. The tunics they wore were standard-issue clothing from the refugee center, simple gray fabric, modestly cut but impeccably clean. Minimal possessions, minimal space taken, minimal footprint on a world that wasn't really theirs. "This is my daughter," Iris Shay said gently. "I apologize for bringing her. Our childcare arrangements dissolved unexpectedly this morning." "It's not a problem," Eric replied, though he hadn't expected the interview to be a package deal. "My daughter Lily is here too. She's just..." And as if cued by destiny itself, Lily exploded out of her room at full speed. "She's here, I made." She froze mid-sentence. Her eyes widened. Her jaw dropped in awe or shock or something in between. "You're blue," Lily, Eric hissed. "We greet guests politely." But instead of being offended, Shay laughed soft and lovely like wind chimes stirred by a gentle breeze. "It is quite all right," she said, smiling warmly at Lily. "Yes, little one, we are blue. My people are called Nilarian." The smaller blue girl Iris peeked out with the tiniest spark of curiosity. Lily, in true seven-year-old fashion, recovered instantly. "I made this," she declared, thrusting forward a banner made of scrap paper, glitter, crooked letters, and heroic levels of enthusiasm. "It says, 'Welcome to our home,' see?" Well, the words sort of said that, if you squinted hard. "It is beautiful," Shay said sincerely, accepting the banner like it was made of stardust. Iris touched a corner, fascinated by the glitter, and Lily immediately grabbed her hand. "Come see my room," she chirped. "I have toys." Lily, slow down. Eric started, but the girls were already halfway down the hall laughing, the blue child trailing behind the golden-haired one like a tiny comet drawn by gravity. "Children adapt quickly," Shay murmured, watching them with a soft smile. "Perhaps we should follow their example." Eric cleared his throat and gestured to the living area. "Please have a seat. I can get you water if you'd like." "The synthesizer is acting up, but I've got actual tea if you prefer, made the old-fashioned way." "Water is fine, thank you." He stepped into the kitchenette, filling 2 glasses from the purified tap, trying not to stare too openly at the woman now observing his messy apartment with quiet curiosity. She didn't look judgmental, just attentive, like she was cataloging the details of a place she wanted to understand before forming an opinion. When he returned, she accepted the glass with a nod of gratitude. "You said in your message that you're newly arrived on Harmony." "Yes, 3 weeks ago." Her tendrils drooped slightly, the first hint of sadness crossing her features. "My husband was a diplomat. He was killed during an attack on our outpost in the Riel system. The Terran Alliance granted refugee status to survivors. Iris and I had nowhere else to go." I'm sorry," Eric said, the words feeling small in the face of such loss. "My wife passed away 6 months ago. Infection. The doctors couldn't treat it in time." Their eyes met, two strangers connected instantly by grief neither had wanted, but both carried every day. "It is difficult," Shay said, "raising a child alone, especially in an unfamiliar place." Before Eric could answer, a crash echoed from Lily's room. He shot to his feet. "Girls!" "Nothing broke," Lily's voice called out. That was rarely a comforting sentence. Shay's smile was knowing. "I should check." They found the girls kneeling beside a toppled shelf. In Iris's trembling hands were the shattered pieces of a crystalline figurine, something delicate, iridescent, heartbreakingly fragile. "I'm sorry," Lily blurted. "I was showing her my stuff and I bumped the shelf and—" Iris was sobbing, soft hiccuping sobs that ripped through the room like tiny lightning strikes. Shay knelt, immediately murmuring in a flowing melodic language that Eric's translator couldn't automatically parse. She gently collected the pieces, hands reverent tendrils, drooping in deep sorrow. "It was her father's gift," Shay said quietly, "the last thing she had of him." Eric felt something crack inside his chest. He knelt beside Lily. "Sweetheart, accidents happen. What matters is that we take responsibility and try to fix what we can." Lily, brave in the only way children could be, edged closer to Iris and placed a tiny hand on her shoulder. "I'm really sorry," she whispered, "but maybe my daddy can fix it. He fixes everything on the whole station." 2 pairs of hopeful eyes turned toward Eric. And then 1 pair of adults, skeptical but praying for a miracle eyes, joined them. He swallowed. "I can try," he said, carefully taking the fragments from Shay. Their fingers brushed. Her skin was warm, surprisingly warm, and that simple contact sent an unexpected spark racing up his arm. There were many kinds of moments that changed a life. Some came like storms. Some arrived with quiet inevitability, and some appeared in the form of a blue-skinned widow standing in his cluttered living room, trusting him with the last memory of her fallen husband. "I will do everything I can," Eric said softly. And for the first time in months, he felt the faintest flicker of something he hadn't dared hope for. Purpose, connection, possibility. Eric's workshop had always been his sanctuary, a place where the chaos of life could be tamed with screws, welds, and logic. The smell of warm circuitry, the hum of tools resting in perfect alignment along the walls, the comforting clutter of spare components. This room was the one corner of his life that obeyed him. So it was here, 3 days after meeting Shay and her daughter, that he sat hunched beneath a magnifying lens, coaxing fragments of crystalline sculpture into alignment with the delicacy of a surgeon. The figurine, what Shay had told him was a sacred animal from her homeworld, was breathtaking even in its shattered state. A creature with elongated fins, flowing lines, and a body that refracted light in soft celestial colors. Iris had carried it across systems as the last piece of her father. Now it lay in fragments on Eric's workbench, held together by trembling hopes and a specialty adhesive he rarely used except for precision micromachinery. He worked, slowly breathing through every adjustment, conscious that this wasn't just a trinket. It was a memory, a legacy, a heartbeat from a world destroyed. A soft knock sounded at the doorway. He lifted his goggles. Shay stood by there, framed by the warm lighting of the workshop, holding two steaming mugs. Today she wore a simple station tunic, sleeves rolled neatly, tendrils free down her back. The sight of her there, calm, composed, quietly radiant, sent a flicker of warmth through him he wasn't prepared to analyze. "The girls are asleep," she said, stepping inside. "I thought you might need refreshment." He accepted the mug, surprise tugging at his mouth. "You remembered my tea preference." "You take it strong," she said. "Bitter, like many engineers I have met." He chuckled softly. "It keeps us alive." She wandered closer, eyes catching the glint of the nearly complete figurine. Her tendrils shifted forward, an Ilarian instinct he'd learned meant curiosity or interest. "Is that almost finished?" he said. She leaned over the workbench close enough that he caught her scent, something soft and floral tinged with an aroma he couldn't quite place, like warm rain after a storm. He felt her breath on his cheek as she examined the figurine. "It is beautiful," she whispered, not referring to the original craftsmanship, but to the restoration. "I cannot believe you repaired it so completely." "Just one more piece." He lifted a small shard with tweezers, took a steadying breath, and gently fitted into the final seam. The adhesive bonded the line, smoothed, and the faint glow within the crystal warmed, as if relieved to be whole again. "There," he said softly, handing it to her. She accepted it with both hands, cradling it like something alive. The shimmering colors reflected in her eyes. Iris will be overjoyed. Eric felt something inside him expand. Something warm, something dangerous, something he wasn't ready to name. "I'm glad." Shay smiled, and the expression lit her from face in a way that made the workshop feel too small. "Your daughter," she said, "has brought Iris out of her shell more in these 3 days than I have in the past 3 months. They laugh, they play, they speak secrets to one another." I had forgotten the sound of my daughter's joy. He swallowed. "Lily's been happier too. I think they needed each other." "Yes," Shay replied softly, "as perhaps we adults do as well." Before he could respond, she sighed, a delicate fall of her shoulders, her tendrils drooping. "I received a notice today," she said. "We must leave refugee housing sooner than expected. 10 days, not 2 weeks. His heart jerked. 10 days? That's impossible. Where are you supposed to go? "There is no place for us yet." She said it matter-of-factly, but the strain beneath the words was unmistakable. Housing priority favors long-term residents in essential personnel. "I work for you, but not in an official capacity." Eric set down, his mug pulse quickening. The thought of Shay and Iris drifting through uncertainty, packing their entire lives into a single bag, yet again it hit him harder than he expected. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about," he said. Shay tilted her head, slightly wary, slightly hopeful. "I have a spare bedroom," he said. "It's not big, but it's enough for you and Iris. You can stay here until you get permanent housing." Shay blinked, stunned. Her tendrils lifted sharply in a reflex he hadn't seen before, as if her body reacted faster than her mind. "You would offer us shelter," she whispered, "but you barely know us." "I know enough," he said firmly. "You're incredible with Lily. The girls get along. And honestly, this place hasn't felt like a home in a long time. You and Iris, you changed that. So yes, if you want, stay." "Eric," her voice went soft, reverent, like he'd opened a door she didn't dare approach. "Among my people, such an offer carries meaning. When an unmarried male offers shelter to a widow and her child, it implies intentions." "What kind of intentions?" he asked, trying and failing to sound unaffected. "Bonding," she said. "Courtship." The workshop suddenly felt warm, too warm. Shay's gaze held his, her eyes deepening in color. And then she laughed softly, the sound wrapping around him like gentle sails catching wind. "I am teasing you, Eric." He exhaled sharply, caught between relief and disappointment he didn't want to examine too closely. But she added, "I am deeply grateful for your offer. For Iris's sake, I accept." Relief washed through him, mingled with something else, anticipation perhaps. A quiet smile warmed her features. "You will have to learn Nalarian customs," she said, her tone turning mischievous. "For instance, when accepting shelter, we seal the agreement with a gesture of gratitude." Before he could ask what that meant, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his cheek. Just 1 second, one heartbeat, but it hit him like a spark to dry tinder. Her warmth lingered, so did her scent. "That is how humans show appreciation," she said innocently. "Yes." As something like that he managed. "Good night, Eric," she murmured, turning toward the hall. As she reached the doorway, her voice softened. "And thank you for restoring Iris's treasure. You humans have remarkably skilled hands." He stood frozen long after she left, fingers brushing the place where her lips had touched. It was nothing, he told himself. It meant nothing, except it didn't feel that way. Saturday came with the quiet sense that something important was happening, though the station around them moved with its usual mechanical rhythm. Shay stood in the living room wearing traditional Nilarian attire she had kept carefully folded in her single bag, a flowing azure robe with silver embroidery shaped like fluid motion. Her tendrils were unbound, cascading gracefully down her back. "It is time," she said. "Time for what Eric asked, carrying a set of fresh linens to the spare room." "For the ritual of new dwelling," she replied, lifting a small burner that released a fragrant, sweet-smelling smoke. "We cleanse the space of lingering energy and welcome the new." Eric blinked. "That's a thing." "For Nilarians, a dwelling is not merely walls," she explained, drifting into the spare room with fluid elegance. "It is an extension of one's spirit." She lit the burner and began moving in gentle, rhythmic patterns, her robe swirling like water, her tendrils floating. Lily and Iris followed behind her, mimicking her movements, giggling as they waved their arms. Eric leaned on the doorway, helplessly charmed. Shay approached him with the burner. "The primary resident must accept the new energies." "What do I do?" "Breathe," she said, "and speak acceptance." He inhaled the smoke, warm spice, strangely soothing. "I accept the new energies." With more conviction, she teased. He straightened, clearing his throat. "I accept these new energies into my home." Her tendrils rippled approvingly. "And now," she said, "we join essences." "The what now?" She pressed her palm against his. A tingling sensation blossomed instantly, spreading up his arm, warm and intimate. Her eyes held his, soft and deep and unguarded. In Nilarian tradition, she murmured, this symbolizes the merging of life paths. For a breathless moment, they stood so close he could feel her heartbeat through her palm. "Is this still part of the ritual?" he asked quietly. "Perhaps," she whispered, "not entirely." But then Lily shouted, "Can we do the essence joining too?" Shay stepped back gracefully. "Yes, everyone in the home may share." As the girls pressed their palms together, laughing at the ticklish sensation Eric caught, Shay watching him was something unspoken, a question, a possibility, a quiet unfolding of hope. By the time the day ended, the spare room held their few belongings. Iris slept curled with Lily on the floor, and the apartment felt strangely, undeniably alive in a way it hadn't since Sarah's passing. That night, as Eric stood washing dishes, he felt someone step beside him. Shay reached past him, turning off the water, her hand brushing his. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving us a home." Her eyes held his with a gentleness that struck deeper than he expected. And for the first time, Eric realized this wasn't just two families living together. Something was beginning. Something fragile. Something powerful. Something he wasn't sure either of them was ready for, but neither could walk away from now. For the first time in months, mornings in the Donovan apartment felt warm, alive. Not perfect. Lily still left cereal boxes open and Eric still tripped over toys, but there was something new woven into the fabric of their days. Laughter, movement, a feminine presence so gentle yet so steady that Eric felt it even before he opened his eyes. Shay was already in the kitchen when he stepped out, her tendrils lifted in a relaxed curl as she prepared Nilarian grain porridge for the girls. Iris sat beside Lily, the two of them sharing an animated discussion in half English, half giggles. When Shay turned, offering him a mug of coffee exactly the way he liked it, strong, bitter, slightly sweet, her fingers brushed his just long enough to remind him of the essence ritual. "Good morning," she said. The way she said it made the words feel like sunlight. "Morning," he replied, trying not to sound like a man whose entire chemistry shifted at the sight of her. But not everyone on the station shared that warmth. Rumors spread quickly on Harmony, an orbital city full of diplomats, engineers, and aliens who loved drama almost as much as oxygen. By the time Eric reached his engineering section that day, his co-workers were practically vibrating with gossip. Heard you've got an alien girlfriend, Martinez teased, elbowing him as they calibrated a regulator system. She's Lily's caretaker, Eric corrected sharply. She needed housing. And you needed help? Martinez smirked. Uh-huh. Very practical arrangement. Before Eric could answer, his supervisor called him into an urgent meeting. And that was where everything began to tilt. Harmony Station's council wing was pristine white walls, silver lighting, soft footstep, acoustics engineered to intimidate. Eric had only been summoned here twice in his career. Both times involved major malfunctions. Neither had involved a Nilarian official staring him down like a scientist examining a contaminated sample. Counselor Trell Van stood tall in imposing tendrils arranged in sharp formal angles. His eyes sea-green like Shay's, but colder, harder tracked Eric with assessing precision. Engineer Donovan, he said without greeting, I understand you have taken one of our refugees into your home. Yes, Eric replied evenly. She and her daughter needed stable housing. It's temporary. Trellvan's tendrils stiffened. In Nilarian society, such arrangements imply intentions. So this was about honor, pride, possession. With respect, Eric said, this is human space. Shay is free to choose where she lives. This is interspecies space, Trellvan corrected sharply. And Shay Navern is a widow of diplomatic standing. Her reputation is of concern. Her choices are her concern, Eric countered. They locked eyes, two men from different worlds, neither willing to step back. You would be wise, Trellvan said quietly, to consider the cultural consequences of your actions. Eric left the room with a tight jaw and a simmering anger he couldn't extinguish. But things only escalated from there. The next morning, Lily poked at her breakfast, uncharacteristically silent. What's wrong, sweetheart? Eric asked. She and Iris exchanged a nervous glance. Some kids who were mean yesterday, Lily murmured. They said our family is weird. Iris spoke so softly he almost missed it. Moran said, I shouldn't play with humans. He said my mother is dishonoring our people. Shay went still, very still. Her tendrils coiled in a defensive pattern Eric had begun to recognize. Moran, she repeated, Counselor Trellvan's son. Iris nodded. Eric's blood ran hot with anger. Did you tell your teacher? No, Lily whispered. He was busy. But Iris said to ignore them. Shay knelt between the girls, her voice steady but trembling with emotion. Listen to me. There is nothing wrong with our home. There is nothing wrong with your friendship. Counselor Trellvan's son is repeating ignorance he does not understand. Eric's hands curled into fists. I'll talk to the school. But the day had more in store. The school administrator's office smelled of disinfectant and stress. Lily sat beside Iris, knuckles scraped, chin held high, in stubborn defiance. Iris had dried tear tracks on her cheeks. What happened? Eric asked, kneeling. Moran pushed Iris, Lily said, and called her a species traitor, and he said you were Shay's servant. So I pushed him back. Then he called humans stupid, so I hit him. You hit the counselor's son, Eric muttered. He deserved it, Lily insisted. Behind them, Shay was already in a tense conversation with the administrator, and then Counselor Trellvan entered. The temperature in the room dropped. His tendrils flared in disgust. This human child assaulted my son. After your son insulted my daughter and her family, Shay snapped back, voice sharp enough to cut steel. Family, Trellvan spat. This unnatural arrangement is hardly a family. Eric stepped forward, placing himself between the counselor and Shay. That's enough. Trellvan leaned in, eyes blazing. She is a Nilarian widow of high rank. Her future is not yours to shape. Shay's voice softened but carried a depth that shook the room. My choices are mine alone, and I choose to remain with Eric and Lily. Trellvan stiffened with fury. This is not over. He stormed out, dragging his son behind him. The administrator exhaled heavily. Both girls must apologize tomorrow. Violence is unacceptable. Eric nodded because he had to, not because he believed it. Lily squeezed his hand, defiant, even in guilt. They walked home in heavy silence. Later, when the girls were watching a Hellovid, Eric found Shay in the kitchen preparing dinner, a rhythm she had adopted with natural grace. But her movements were tense, her tendrils tightly coiled. I'm sorry, he said. I put you in a terrible position. No, Shay replied, turning to face him. Trellvan does not speak for all Nilarian people. His views are old, rigid, and rooted in a system that never served widows like me. Eric stepped closer. This isn't about culture, is it? Shay hesitated, then quietly. Trellvan has expressed interest in me as a potential mate. Eric froze, a burst of something fierce and unwelcome tightening his chest. What? It is tradition, she said bitterly. Widows of diplomats are often courted by high-ranking males. It is considered an honor. Is that what you want? Eric asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Her answer was immediate. No. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel her warmth. He is cold, calculating, bound by rules older than reason. Nothing like, she faltered. Nothing like what he whispered. She looked up, her sea-green eyes illuminated by something soft and dangerous. Nothing like you. Silence softened the edges of the room. Eric moved first slowly, giving her every chance to pull back. She didn't. When his hand cupped her cheek, her tendrils lifted, brushing lightly against his fingers. Shay leaned into him, breath warm against his lips. Shay, he whispered, not sure what he meant to say. She answered by rising onto her toes and kissing him. Tentative at first, testing, then deeper like a dam breaking, like two people finally allowing themselves to feel what they had been circling for days. His arms settled around her waist. Her hands slid up to his shoulders. The soft press of her body, the warmth of her skin, the delicate brush of her tendrils. It all blended into something exquisitely right. When they finally parted, breath mingling, her forehead rested gently against his. That, Eric murmured, was definitely not part of any Nilarian custom. Her laugh was soft and shimmering. No, that was entirely my choice. Something shifted inside both of them, something irreversible. The world might push back, people might gossip, counselors might rage. But here in this kitchen, in this fragile new family, something real had taken root. Something worth fighting for. Harmony Station's council chamber was a place built for spectacle. A circular room of polished crystal panels and soft luminescent pillars. Its architecture was designed to inspire awe and perhaps intimidation. Eric had walked these halls before as an engineer summoned for technical consultations. But standing in the center of the chamber now, with Shay at his side and 7 alien representatives staring down at them from elevated seats, he felt something else entirely. He felt judged. He stood straight, anyway, fingers laced with Shay's. Her hand trembled slightly, her tendrils arranged in an anxious coil, but she didn't let go. Iris and Lily were with a station caregiver in the waiting area. They didn't need to witness this. But every second apart from them carved more pressure into Eric's chest. Commander Graves, the human representative, cleared his throat. This hearing has been called to address concerns submitted by Counselor Trell Van regarding a domestic arrangement he considers culturally inappropriate. Counselor, you may state your case. Trell Van rose, his tall, lithe form casting a long shadow across the chamber floor. His tendrils were coiled in a stiffly formal pattern, the Nilarian equivalent of ceremonial armor. When he spoke, his voice held the confidence of someone who believed the law bent to him like metal around a forge. Esteemed counsel, he began, I bring before you a matter of a grave significance to the integrity of Nilarian cultural tradition. Shay Navern, widow of the diplomatic envoy, Krell Van Navern, has engaged in an unauthorized relationship with a human engineer mere months after her husband's passing. He paused for effect. By Nilarian law, widows of diplomatic rank must observe a mourning period of 2 cycles. 2 full cycles. Only then, with approval from the diplomatic corps, may they accept any new attachment, much less one with a member of another species. He turned toward Eric, his expression dripping disdain. Engineer Donovan has violated the sanctity of another culture's customs, interfering with our social structures and placing undue pressure upon a vulnerable widow. Shay inhaled sharply, but Eric squeezed her hand before she could speak. Furthermore, Trell Van continued, their arrangement threatens the stability of Nilarian social hierarchy. If permitted to continue, it could encourage further erosion of our cultural principles, leading to... His tendrils twitched rigidly. Chaos. He stepped back into the shadows. Commander Graves nodded. Thank you, Counselor. Mr. Donovan, Ms. Navern, your response. Eric stepped forward, his heart pounded, but his voice remained steady. Counselors, he said, dressing the chamber as a trained engineer, addressed a set of complex variables. I understand and respect cultural traditions. But Harmony Station was built on the idea that residents, regardless of species, have the right to autonomy. Shay and I met through a professional arrangement. She needed work. I needed help caring for my daughter. What developed between us came naturally. It wasn't forced. It wasn't planned. It simply happened. He glanced at Shay and her eyes softened. We're not asking anyone to approve or participate in our relationship. We only ask for the freedom to live our lives without outside interference. Shay is not being coerced. She is not being manipulated. She is choosing this. choosing us, just as I am choosing her. A murmur rippled through the representatives. Shay stepped forward, next her voice a musical counterpoint to the tension saturating the chamber. I honor my people's heritage, she began, but our traditions were forged in a different time. My late husband served Nilarian diplomacy with honor. He believed in cultural exchange. He believed in progress. And he believed that widows should not live as prisoners of custom. Her tendrils lifted with determination, glowing faintly with emotion. What Counselor Trellvan calls protection is simply control. The mourning laws he cites were created to secure political alliances, not to preserve love or dignity. They have been used for centuries to bind widows to the will of powerful men, stripping them of choice. That caused an audible stir. The Centauri representative leaned forward. Counselor Trellvan, is it not true that diplomatic widows in your society are often courted by high-ranking officials for political advantage? Trellvan's tendrils twitched, betraying tension. Such unions are mutually beneficial. Convenient Shade cut in sharply, but not mutual. Graves turned toward Trellvan. The question before this council is simple. Has Shay Naverne been coerced by Mr. Donovan or by human culture into a relationship? Shay lifted her chin. No, my choice was made freely. The Praxian representative chittered thoughtfully, tapping a claw on its crystalline desk. Then perhaps this matter is resolved. Trellvan stiffened. It is not resolved. He stepped forward again, and this time something cracked in his voice. Something unplanned, something desperate. You do not understand what is at stake. The chamber fell silent. Commander Graves narrowed his eyes. Explain. Trellvan's tendrils curled inward, a sign of internal conflict. He hesitated. Then with a steadying breath, he spoke words that shifted the atmosphere of the chamber entirely. There is a prophecy, he said. The entire chamber buzzed with sudden whispers. Trellvan continued. The ancient texts of my people speak of a forbidden union between a Nilarian and a human that will produce offspring of extraordinary potential. A child whose very existence could destabilize the foundations of our society. A child with the adaptability of humans and the psychic sensitivity of Nilarians. A child who could alter the balance of power irreversibly. He swept his gaze across the council. For generations, the diplomatic corps has monitored all interactions between humans and Nilarians to prevent such prophesied unions. It is why mixed alliances were forbidden. It is why Nilarian diplomats are assigned to distant sectors with minimal human contact. Shay stared at him, horror in her eyes. Is that why Trellvan was posted to remote outposts to keep him away from humans? Yes, Trellvan answered coldly. He accepted that duty, as should you. Shay recoiled as if struck. Eric placed a steadying arm around her. This prophecy, Eric said, is driving you to interfere in our lives. You do not grasp the magnitude, Trellvan snapped. A hybrid child would possess abilities neither species could fully control. They could disrupt our hierarchies, ignore our boundaries, dismantle the very traditions that keep our people stable. We cannot allow such a thing to occur. So this is about fear, Eric said quietly. Your fear. It is about survival. No one spoke for a long moment. Then the Drell representative, a tall, crystalline being whose voice resonated like chimes, spoke. Cultures must evolve or perish, Counselor. Fear is not a valid argument for restricting the freedom of individuals. Commander Graves rose. This council has heard enough. He turned to Eric and Shay. By a vote of 5-2, this council finds that station charter protections of personal autonomy supersede cultural mourning laws. The petition to dissolve this union is denied. Ms. Naverne and Mr. Donovan are free to determine their relationship without external interference. Shay inhaled sharply. Eric felt her hand tighten, her relief palpable. But Trellvan was not finished. He surged forward, tendrils flaring with fury. If the council will not protect my people's future, then ancient law grants another path. Eric's pulse quickened. What are you talking about? Trellvan raised his chin. I invoke the right of challenge. The chamber erupted into chaos. Shay gasped, stepping in front of Eric. No, that law is archaic, obsolete. It is binding, Trellvan replied coldly. A ritual combat of honor. The victor claims the right to determine the widow's future. Commander Graves slammed a hand on the podium. This is a human-run station. Ancient dueling rituals are not recognized here. But the Nilarian representative lifted a hand. Our laws are clear. The right of challenge, once invoked, must be satisfied or formally refused. Refused, Eric echoed. Trellvan turned toward him, eyes gleaming. If the human refuses the challenge, he proves himself unworthy. Shay would then be returned to Nilarian guardianship for her own protection. Shay's voice cracked. Eric, please don't. But something in Trellvan's expression, his condescension, his certainty, his possession, ignited a fire inside Eric stronger than fear. He stepped forward. I accept. Shay reached for him, tendrils trembling in terror. Eric, Nilarian warriors are stronger, faster. I know, he said gently, but this man has been trying to take away our family. Someone has to stand up to him. Trellvan smiled with venomous satisfaction. The chamber was rearranged in minutes. Representatives stood back as attendants marked a glowing circular boundary on the floor. The Circle of Honor. Eric removed his jacket. His muscles tightened under his shirt, his breath steady but quick. Shay stood behind him, fingertips grazing his arm. Please, she whispered, be careful. He turned and touched her cheek. For you always. Then he stepped into the circle. Trellvan entered from the opposite side, tendrils unfurled in jagged patterns of battle readiness. The Praxian chairperson lifted a crystalline baton. Combatants prepare. Eric lowered into a stance not perfect, not trained, but grounded by years of real physical work in high-gravity environments. Trellvan's eyes gleamed. Begin. The baton struck, echoing through the chamber. And the fight for the future of their family began. The chamber seemed to shrink as Eric and Trellvan faced one another inside the glowing circle. The hum of the boundary line vibrated faintly through the floor, a reminder that once the duel began, there would be no stepping back, literally or figuratively. Shay lingered just beyond the boundary, her tendrils trembling in patterns of fear she couldn't hide. Eric's pulse thundered in his ears. He'd fought before broken up, drunken scuffles between engineers fended off the occasional intoxicated Praxian in the docking bay. But this was different. This wasn't a bar fight. This wasn't adrenaline or pride. This was a challenge to the life he had chosen, a challenge to the fragile, beautiful new family that had begun to bloom in the quiet corners of their shared home. And he wasn't about to lose it. Trellvan moved first. His approach was eerily smooth, almost serpentine. His tendrils extended in a flare of motion, twice their resting length, tipped with hardened pads capable of striking like whips. Eric dodged the first swipe by instinct alone, the tendrils slicing the air where his head had been a fraction of a second earlier. You are outmatched, Trellvan said calmly, circling him. Your kind always is. Funny, Eric replied breathlessly. That's not what your counsel just said. Trellvan's second strike didn't aim for his head, but his legs fast, low, and brutal. One tendril wrapped around Eric's ankle before he could fully evade, yanking him off balance. He hit the ground hard, but rolled narrowly, avoiding a sharp strike aimed at his ribs. Yield, Trellvan said. Spare yourself humiliation. Eric pushed himself to his feet, breathing hard. Not a chance. Trellvan's lips curled. Then suffer. He lunged. The next few exchanges blurred into a series of dodges, impacts, and narrow escapes. Eric blocked two strikes with his forearm. Pain radiated instantly, tendrils leaving stinging welts that burned like chemical lashes. Trellvan was faster, stronger, more flexible. Every movement was precise, honed by a lifetime of cultural combat rituals, the kind of training Eric had never experienced beyond station self-defense courses. You see, Trellvan hissed, attacking from two angles at once. You are all brawn, no instinct, no evolution. Eric grunted, absorbing a strike to his shoulder that nearly sent him reeling out of the circle. Sweat dripped down his brow. His muscles protested with every motion. But he didn't step back. Couldn't step back. He caught the next tendril between both hands, gripping it so hard his knuckles whitened. Trellvan tried to yank it free, but Eric held on. You know, Eric growled, teeth clenched as he dug his boots into the floor. You're right about one thing. Trellvan paused, eyes narrowing. We don't have your instincts. Eric shifted his weight, suddenly pulling Trellvan forward with all the force of a man who'd hauled machinery twice his size. But we do have leverage. Trellvan stumbled forward, surprised, unbalanced. Eric pivoted, using Trellvan's own momentum to swing him hard toward the circle's edge. Gasps erupted from the observers as the counselor skidded across the floor, his tendrils flailing to regain footing. He stopped barely a hair's width from the boundary. His expression twisted into shock, then fury. You insolent, he charged. This time the strikes weren't calculated. They were vicious. Tendrils cracked across Eric's arms and chest, one catching his cheek and drawing blood. Another wrapped around his waist, tightening like a constrictor. Eric fought against the crushing pressure, but the tendril pinned his arms, lifting him slightly off the ground. You will not soil my people's legacy, Trellvan seethed. You will not take what is rightfully mine. Eric struggled for breath, vision dimming. At the edge of consciousness, he heard Shay's voice, frantic pleading. Eric, plead. Her voice cut through the haze like a lifeline. And suddenly, memories crashed into him. Lily laughing as she chased Iris through the hallway. Shay smiling softly in the morning light as she poured him coffee. Iris clutching her restored figurine tears, turning to joy. The way their apartment, once cold, now pulsed with warmth, laughter, and life. The kiss they shared in the quiet of the kitchen, a moment that felt like fate unfolding. He couldn't lose that. He wouldn't lose that. With a roar tearing through his lungs, Eric twisted hard, dropping his full weight backward. Trellvan's tendrils strained but didn't break yet. The shift in momentum forced the counselor off balance. Eric landed heavily, but the move freed his arms long enough for him to reach up and grab Trellvan's extended tendril with both hands. Humans weren't psychic. They weren't graceful. They weren't naturally strong compared to many alien races. But they were stubborn. So damn stubborn. You think humans break easily? Eric rasped, pulling with every ounce of strength left inside him. We don't break at all. He yanked. Trellvan stumbled forward right into Eric's rising knee. The impact cracked through the chamber like a detonating pulse. Trellvan cried out, collapsing to one side. Eric didn't give him time to recover. He hooked an arm around the counselor's torso and used a technique his father had taught him decades ago during rough backyard wrestling sessions, simple, primal, effective. He lifted. Trellvan thrashed, but Eric pushed through the pain, screaming up his legs, and hurled the Nilarian warrior toward the boundary. Trellvan skidded, sliding, scrambling, and his foot crossed the line. The boundary glowed bright red. Silence swallowed the chamber. Then, the challenge is complete, the Praxian chairperson declared. Eric Donovan is victorious. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the council. Trellvan remained on the ground, tendrils limp in defeat, staring up at the ceiling with stunned disbelief. Impossible, he whispered. A human defeated me. Eric stood over him, bloody bruised, breathing hard but unbroken. Not impossible, he said, voice hoarse, just human. For the first time, Trellvan looked at him not with contempt, but with something resembling reluctant respect, and something else, something resembling fear. A slow, pained exhale left the counselor. The ancient texts, they warned us. His eyes flickered toward Shay. Perhaps the prophecy was never about destruction. Perhaps it was about change. Eric helped him stand because humans didn't humiliate their defeated opponents. That's one thing we're good at, Eric said quietly, changing things. Trellvan bowed his head slightly, an acknowledgement Eric never expected. Then he stepped back, accepting the council's ruling in silence. But Eric barely noticed, because the moment he stepped out of the circle, Shay collided into him. Arms around his torso, face buried in his shoulder tendrils, curling around his neck like living threads of relief. You fool, she whispered, voice cracking. You reckless, beautiful fool. He wrapped his arms around her, pain forgotten. I had to. You could have died, but I didn't. Her hands trembled as she cupped his cheeks, eyes shimmering with tears that caught the chamber lights. You fought for us. I'll always fight for us. She kissed him in front of the entire council. Slow, desperate, grateful, her tendrils sweeping across his skin like a declaration. Gasps echoed around the chamber, but neither of them cared. After a long moment, she rested her forehead against his. You are everything my people fear, she said softly. Good, Eric murmured. Maybe it's time someone scared the old traditions. That night, their apartment glowed with celebration. Lily perched on the couch, wide-eyed, as she dramatically reenacted the duel using toy figures making exaggerated swooshing sounds, while Iris corrected her on Nilarian fighting accuracy. Shay prepared a soothing salve and applied it gently to Eric's wounds, her touch tender, reverent. I can't believe you threw him, she whispered, brushing balm along a welt on his shoulder. He is a trained warrior. Eric hissed as the balm tingled. He was pretty heavy, actually. Shay laughed, a musical warm sound that filled the home like sunlight. Human, she said, shaking her head. So physically limited, so irrational. So what, he teased. So extraordinary. He kissed her softly, nothing heated, nothing urgent, just a quiet sealing of the truth already written between them. When they pulled apart, she rested against him, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Later, when the girls were asleep and the station lights dimmed into simulated night, Eric and Shay stood together at the viewport. Stars stretched endlessly across black velvet, silent witnesses to the fragile, improbable family they had built. Do you fear the prophecy? Shay asked, fingers intertwined with his. Should I? If we ever have children, she said softly, they may not be ordinary. Eric smiled. No kid of ours was ever going to be ordinary. She laughed quietly and leaned into him. You Terrans, always looking forward, never afraid of what might be. That's our thing, he said. We don't cling to the past. We build the future. She lifted her gaze to him, her eyes shimmering with a tenderness that stole his breath. And what future do you want, Eric Donovan? The one where we stay together, he answered. The one where Lily and Iris grow up side by side. The one where we stop fighting the world and start building a life. With you. Her tendrils brushed his cheek like a kiss. Then that is the future we will make. They kissed slow and certain, framed by starlight. Outside, the galaxy waited vast, unpredictable, full of danger and possibility. Inside their home, a new family stood at the threshold of something bigger than prophecy, bigger than law, bigger than fear. Human and Ilarian, father and widow, two daughters laughing in their sleep. A love forged in grief, strengthened by courage and sealed by a ritual combat that proved one truth. Humans don't win because they're strong. They win because they refuse to back down. And sometimes that was enough to change the whole galaxy.